And we're in chapter 19,
verse 21.
verse 21. And I think we have some words coming up in here, so good thing Kathy's got the mic.
Yeah. When these events were over, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem. After I've been there, he said, I must see Rome as well. So after sending 2 of those who assisted him, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia, he himself stayed in the province of Asia for a while. During that time, there was a major disturbance about the way. For a person named Demetrius, a silversmith who made silver shrines of Artemis, provided a great deal of business for craftsmen. Then, when he had assembled them, as well as the workers engaged in this type of business, he said, Men, you know that our prosperity is derived from this business. You both see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost the whole province of Asia, this man Paul has persuaded and misled a considerable number of people by saying the gods made by hand are not gods. So not only do we run a risk that our business may be discredited, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be despised and her magnificence come to the verge of ruin, the very one whom the whole province of Asia and the world adore. When they heard this, they were filled with rage and began to cry out, Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! So the city was filled with confusion, and they rushed all together into the amphitheater, dragging Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians, who were Paul's traveling companions. Though Paul wanted to go in before the people, the disciples did not let him. Even some of the provincial officials of Asia, who were his friends, sent word to him, pleading with him not to take a chance by going into the amphitheater. Meanwhile, some were shouting one thing and some another because the assembly was in confusion, and most of them didn't know why they had come together. Then some of the crowd gave Alexander advice when the Jews pushed him to the front. So, motioning with his hand, Alexander wanted to make his defense to the people. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, a united cry went up from all of them for about 2 hours. Great is the Artemis of the Ephesians.
Okay, let's pause there for a minute because we got a lot of stuff that's happening. This guy starts crying out, Paul is talking bad about our goddess. And why was he concerned? They were making money, selling idols. Now this goddess, Artemis.
Yeah, and that might reference as Diana.
Well, it's Artemis in Greek, Diana in in Rome.
Okay, thanks.
And she was the big god. In fact, the temple that they had built in Ephesus was 4 times the size of the Parthenon.
Wow.
I don't know if you've been to Greece and seen the Parthenon, but it's big. It's bigger than the basketball court over at the college. I mean, it's 4 times the size of the Parthenon. And this was a very important goddess. They had shrines to her all the way from Spain to Syria.
Oh,
There were 33 major shrines. And she was sort of the goddess of fertility. And this guy is making a bundle of money, and he wasn't making things of Artemis. He was making they were making images of the temple because the temple was just spectacular. Now, when they started doing some archaeology, there was a question. Did he make a lot of temples out of silver? They discovered that they found a lot of clay, models and have now assumed that if somebody was digging in the dirt and found silver, they reused it. They melted it down, made it into something else. So, here we are on this cusp. Paul is in a position where he's saying, Judaism, you have an orthodoxy to follow. In the Greco-Roman religions, there was the performance rituals. But Christianity, remember, Christianity didn't have that orthodoxy of the Jews, and you didn't have to make sacrifices. So it made it a pretty palatable religion. You didn't have to go out and get the fatted calf and make a sacrifice. You just had to accept it, Jesus, and you were good. So this was a new way of seeing religious beliefs, that you didn't have to, there was no temple, there was, no shrines. In fact, I think somewhere earlier in Acts it said, the tent of meeting was the important thing.
Remember at the well, when Jesus was talking to the lady, he says, the day is coming and now is when you will worship God in spirit and truth and not in some building made of
Yeah,
stone.
that's right. You don't have to go to Jerusalem. That the church, and Paul is kind of saying, and this article, I think, enforces, the church is the people. It's not the building. Remember the old thing we did as kids? Here is the church, here is the steeple, open the door and see all the people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the people that make the church.
Well, certainly, things have evolved since.
Yes. Yes, things have changed in a couple thousand years, imagine that.
Yeah.
But, it's like shrines that, I have one of those icons of, I don't remember who the saint was, but those icons that they have in Orthodox churches are not worshipped. They're venerated.
Reminders to me.
Hmm?
Reminders.
Reminders, yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in churches, there's a lot of stuff that ought to be venerated,
Yeah.
but it's worshipped instead. I've shared over the last 16 years this story, I'm sure at least once, but I was on the Urban Affairs Committee in the Diocese of Michigan, and I was sitting next to one of the bishops, and there was a church in downtown Detroit, an Episcopal church. The members had all moved out to the suburbs, so they were going to sell the church. Well, one family went to their pastor in a suburban church and said, my parents gave the altar to that church, and I'm going to ask them to ship it up here. And that pastor called the diocese and he said, we have an altar. We don't want that altar. Please don't send it up here. And I remember the bishop saying to him, why don't you tell those people in your church you don't want it?
Yeah.
Well, he was kidding, of course, because you would lose a member just like that. So we had people saying, well, we want the altar rail to go to our new church because our family gave the altar rail. That's stuff that wasn't being venerated, it was stuff that was being worshipped. I mean, I know people who have given something in memory of a family member, and maybe it was a Bible, and a new version of the Bible came out, and I remember one of my associate clergy said they wanted to somebody bought the new Bible, but we realized if we would take the old Bible out, we would lose that whole family. So they put the new Bible on top of the old Bible. So they have Bibles like this thick. I mean, it was, but people say, I hear God in that other Bible my family gave. I won't hear God in the new one.
Wow, yeah.
So, Chuck?
I never thought about the difference between a shrine. I always thought of that being a holy place. Then I think of the Shriners. But I think a shrine is like it's a place of adoration or something. There's no information coming out of a shrine, if I understand right. It's just there to be enjoyed and to make you feel worshipful or something. Is that-
Venerated.
Venerated, okay.
Is
And
that true for the
Where a church
blood draw,
or temples where information is imparted.
Yes.
I wonder why the Shriners call themselves Shriners.
I don't know. I think you have to go through a bunch of steps to find out all
Yeah.
the secrets.
Well,
That
there's a
goes with
lot
it.
of different names besides Shriners. I
Don't
mean,
have to write it
the
on
steps
backwards.
and all that.
Yeah.
The Catholics have the shrine of different
My
people.
grandpa was
don't they?
Well, the Catholics, you can't join the shrine if you're Roman Catholic, or you're not supposed to.
But I mean, there are Catholic shrines to different
Oh, yes.
things.
Well,
Yeah.
It could be, yeah, yeah.
There's a Shrine of the Little Flower in Detroit, actually Royal Oak, suburb of Detroit. And that was famous because the priest, there was Roman Catholic Church, the priest who was there was anti-war, and during the Second World War, he was preaching and he was on the radio, and finally they take him off because it wasn't very patriotic. You know, he wanted the boys to come home, and he said, you know, trust God will control Hitler. Well, we were kind of thinking the Marines would do a good
Like our
job controlling.
borders today.
Yeah.
I heard an interesting story, this might be off base, about Adolf Hitler. When he was a little bitty boy, he was on ice and was skating and having fun, and the ice broke and he fell in. And the Catholic priest saw this. He didn't know who he was, but he went and saved him.
wow.
And I tried to think, was that God blessed or what? I mean, he was a mean person, but the priest saved this little boy from drowning. If he would have just said, "Go down," we wouldn't have had the war, probably.
Maybe he wasn't mean when he was a little boy.
Didn't he go to Lutheran Sunday school? Or
Well,
teach it or something
he was
like that?
German, and so he was obviously Lutheran.
He was
No, I thought he was
Catholic.
Catholic.
He was-
He was
We're
Austrian.
not taking
Hmm?
He was Austrian, he was Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
Glad you
yeah,
got your
yeah.
standards.
Not that much matters.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't take.
About
Yeah.
pronouns.
But remember, in all the stories of Jesus performing miracles, he never said, "Do you believe? Are you a good person?"
That's interesting.
He just heals them. And, you know, that's the difference between Jesus and us.
That's the way a doctor is today. That's what they're sworn to do,
Mhm.
to heal the sick or do what they
Yeah.
can do, regardless of.
I remember, you know, in movies and stories you read, some guy who has just murdered a bunch of people, they bring him in the hospital, and some of the people at the hospital say, "I can't believe you're going to treat that guy. You know, let him die." And the doctor said, "I can't do that. I've got to, you know, I've got to make him well. Then you can kill him."
Yeah, I think he's
Yeah,
got,
that's
you know, a
right.
legal responsibility
yes.
to treat him.
That's why, you know, if you're on death row and you're sick, they won't put you to death. They'll make you well and then put you to death.
That's called the Hippocratic Oath, isn't it? Isn't that the Hippocratic?
Well, I don't
Yeah.
think that's
that
in
the doctors
jails.
take?
The doctors take their oath is
Yeah.
to do no harm. And, so, but anyway, back to this. So here we've got, these people are making decisions based on their pocketbook, not based on the value of the religion. They, you know, they just didn't care. And,
Father, are they both ways? It was good or bad, because it says that Paul sent Timothy and Erastus to Asia, and they were to collect money.
mhm.
You know, which to me, and then we went on, and I thought, oh, that's weird. You know,
Well, Paul needed money to travel.
Gotta eat.
Everybody needs the money.
Well,
And so you notice Paul usually doesn't go himself and ask for it. He sends somebody else.
well, Father Carver in verse 19 it says, and many of those who practiced magic brought their books together and began burning them in the sight of everyone. And they counted up the price of them and found it was 50,000 pieces of silver. So they
Yeah.
were counting up how much money they lost.
Well, but these are people who had been converted, who were going to get rid of the evil stuff. This Artemis, she must have been one heck of a goddess, because these people they got them all up in arms. And, if she were the goddess of fertility, that affects everybody. That affects farmers, young parents, young families. I mean, fertility was in the ancient empires.
We're gonna
Was-
find out more about Artemis in the next verse.
Yes. So, here, when you've got somebody saying, you need to get rid of that God, it was bad. So why don't you read through I think that'll take us to the end of the chapter, won't it? Yeah.
Which verse are we on now?
35.
Okay.
However, when the city clerk had calmed the crowd down, he said, "Men of Ephesus, what man is there who doesn't know that the city of the Ephesians is the temple guardian of the great Artemis and of the image that fell from heaven? Therefore, since these things are undeniable, you must keep calm and not do anything rash. For you have brought these men here who are not temple robbers or blasphemers of our goddess. So if Demetrius and the craftsmen who are with him have a case against anyone, the courts are in session, and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you want something else, it must be decided in a legal assembly. In fact, we run a risk of being charged with rioting for what happened today, since there is no justification that we can give as to a reason for this disorderly gathering." After saying this, he dismissed the assembly.
Okay. This, one thing is, as I read this Artemis was a big deal. But who's the fake god that we read about in the Old Testament?
Baal.
Baal. I mean, you've got that whole Testament talking about Baal. Never mention Artemis. And Baal was also the god of fertility. So here, that's that's far east. Baal was, in the area that's now Syria, Mesopotamia.
Geography.
Yeah, I mean, they're farther east. Now, here we're into the Greek and Roman gods, and the big deal goddess there is Artemis. And remember, I keep forgetting, who is the wife that packed the idol of Baal?
Rachel.
Rachel. They're leaving, and the first thing she does is she packs
Well,
her.
it wasn't necessarily Baal. It was the family gods, which were the Lars.
Right, but here she is, and, first thing she packs. These, and this was the problem that the Jews faced all the time, is when life was good, they kind of drifted away from Yahweh, and Baal was good time God. In fact, it's mentioned that in the temple of Baal, they had temple prostitutes. And so, you can see why most guys, instead of going to the club on Friday night, they went to the temple. I'm going to go worship, honey. So, I mean, there was some attraction to this. So here now, we're dealing with the beginning of the church. So this is only a couple centuries where they're talking about Artemis. But we're at 2,000 years of hearing about Baal. And it seemed like every time something bad came up to the Jews, they're worshiping Baal, building the golden idol. I mean, they're always drifting away. So now in the Western Church, we had Artemis and their little silver statues. No mention of actually a statue of Artemis herself. But we would assume that she would have been a very attractive.
Well, why was that guy making idols of the picture of the temple then?
Well, I have a
It was one
picture
of-
of a statue of Artemis in my Bible.
Right, there were some statues, but the temple was just extraordinary.
Worldwide. It was
Oh, the
known
very
worldwide.
special.
It was,
Yeah.
it was one of the seven wonders of the
Is
ancient
that the-
world.
Yes,
Acropolis?
Yes.
What is
Right.
this?
one of
It's
the,
Artemisian,
Yeah,
where,
the
where
temple.
the temple to Artemis.
was one of the 8 wonders of the world, of the ancient world. And so, I mean, can you imagine, I mean, I've not seen the Parthenon. I've seen pictures of it. And it's spectacular. But this place was 4 times bigger. I mean,
I've got a reconstruction of it in my Bible.
yeah,
Where was it located?
Ephesus.
Turkey.
Says reconstruction of the Artemisium, the great temple of Artemis at Ephesus. The temple, begun in 360 BC to honor the mother goddess of the Anatolian region, was completed by the Greeks. It is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 4 times larger than the Parthenon at Athens.
I can't remember anything about the wonders of the world anymore. I used to kind of know them all by heart. It wasn't a test, it was just interesting.
Yeah.
The Taj Mahal,
That is
the
qualified.
Grand Canyon.
Well, of the ancient world, it was things like the Hanging Tower, or the Hanging Gardens of
Gardens of
Babylon.
Babylon.
The lighthouse at Pharos,
Yes, with the,
and there was a statue of
Zeus.
was it
I
Zeus?
think it was Zeus.
Across bridging the water.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, that was the Colossus of Rhodes.
yes.
The Colossus of Rhodes.
You know, I always thought that would be spectacular to see because they
Ships
built
went
this,
between his legs.
yeah,
Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
so,
Well, it occurs to me that once again, the Roman rules saved Paul because they didn't want a mob.
yeah. Yeah, we got this official who intervenes and
Yeah.
says, you know, again, now this happened just previously, where they said, hey, if you guys got a problem,
Yeah.
let's go to a proconsul and you know, take it before the court. Go see Judge Judy and get a ruling. So,
Boy, does she ever give them.
Okay, I'm ready for my gig now.
yes,
I was deferring to the Taj Mahal, but we were in church to show you how the Bible says that nothing's really old or new. It all keeps, it's just on the wheel. We had a pastor, he could really preach the Bible, in Bartlesville, Presbyterian, USA. And he stood up in 2002 and he divorced the denomination because they were beginning to depart from the scriptures. Okay, but in his swan song, he said, there are a few in here that are worshiping Diana.
Really?
That good man. I said, okay, but you never know. But he said, that's a fact. I said, okay.
I wonder how you knew that, why he would say that.
oh, Diana.
I'm so young and you're so old.
Yeah, that would have been Paul Anka, wouldn't it?
Paul, stand by me.
Anka has a certain kind of biblical ring.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I should know
You
that.
know what?
There's
I think it's, no.
There's
Well, I
a
think he would be.
story about
I think he's.
an assistant pastor and the primary pastor didn't get along. And so the assistant pastor was going to leave, and it was his last Sunday, and he was going to preach. And in this denomination, the preacher could pick whatever text he wanted. And I think it was from Numbers, but the passage said, you stay here with the ass while I go ahead and prepare a way.
That's funny.
I always thought that
Or I was gonna tell you, after this pastor left, of course, there's a big cloud over the church of depressed, because a lot of people liked him and some were beginning to depart. But it wasn't long, in the basement, they said this was something everybody was invited to. They played the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, dear.
Now, Jed represented something in the kingdom of God, and Mr. Drysdale, and we got to figure this out. That boy, we are kind of getting away from it here, you know. But they were using it as an object lesson. I thought, goodness, I am so out of here.
Interesting.
One of the commentaries in talking about this whole concept of, you know, buying statues or images of the temple. Well, this is a commentary from me. This is kind of what a lot of us do when we go on vacation. I mean, how many people have been to New York and came back with a little Statue of Liberty?
Yeah.
And, or, you know, you went somewhere and came back with an image.
A knick-knack of some
Souvenir.
kind.
Yeah, yes.
Well, Catholics, they have the classic Jesus on the dashboard.
Well,
Is that the
yeah,
same?
I'm happy with that. I don't
That-
care.
yeah, that's so when they say
Christians
Jesus
have-
take the wheel, he's closer to it.
You got this, Lord. You got
I don't think most Protestants, anyway, even think there's any, see the difference between veneration and worship.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a fine line.
yeah, it can be a fine
I
line,
used to
but,
go to summer school up at Marymount in Salina. They had racks of holy cards that would
yeah.
not quit. And I just love holy cards. They're so
Oh, yes, you do.
I'm getting the ones, the baby lamb with Jesus, give to my grandkids, saying, oh, look, because, you know, it's nice for them to know.
Well, back in the Diocese of Michigan, we'd have a clergy retreat once a year, and it was usually held at a convent or, you know, some religious school. And I remember that I'd go in the room, and the first thing I'd do is take the crucifix off the wall and put it in the desk drawer.
Oh, good.
Oh, really?
Remember,
Yeah.
the Bible says there are some that will worship the form
Right.
and not the substance.
Yes,
Well, how does that go? The day is worship the form of religion, the form. How many crosses, everything here. Got
yeah,
visual, how it feels, you know.
Yeah.
And disregard the substance or
Well, I think
put less importance.
Episcopalians are pretty good at regarding, I don't know, vestments and the,
You keep
fancy
it clean
stuff.
in a well-ordered church. It's nice.
we like to think
Beautiful.
that anyway.
I like to look at beautiful. I like going in Catholic churches.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I St. Teresa's and the one in South Hutch is just,
The one
Well,
in
we
South
did.
Hutch is gorgeous,
huh?
because I
Yeah.
delivered flowers there.
That's giving honor to God. I mean, that can be a real deal. You know,
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Well, that's why when I travel, I always spend time in the cathedrals and take pictures, because
they are unbelievable.
Icons.
yeah, I mean,
You
it's,
think how many years it took to get them built, and some of them never are finished because they,
well, I'm amazed at how they built them without laser levels and high-lows and,
well, they're getting Notre Dame back.
Without
Yeah.
plastic.
yeah.
I have not
Some
checked
way.
up on that in a long time.
Coming along.
But this one commentary
Stuff.
says that he felt that Luke believes that one's attitude towards material possessions reveals one's attitude about God.
Boy, do I believe that.
And, you know, these people who wanted to buy those little
Yeah.
silver images of the temple, you know, that kind of lets you know what they thought about God. They were concerned with Artemis, not with God. So
That is well spoken.
now in verse 26, soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized Gaius and the other guy, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia. You know, that's just an example of fear-mongering. You know, these people,
Okay, I see that.
they got wrapped up with the fear of what was going to go on. You know, how is this thing going to happen? And he goes on to say, first, even allowing for dramatic hyperbole, the point of influence of Christianity had spread well beyond Ephesus during Paul's 3 years in Asia. And secondly, the summary of Paul's evangelistic preaching echoes the content of his preaching to pagans in Athens. So, you know, he did the same thing in Athens. He turned people around. And, you know, he was able to point out that this belief in God was not a belief in an idol, that it really was something that was part of your being. You know, that when, it's kind of the same feeling I get when I sing some of those great hymns. You know, In the Garden is one of my favorite hymns.
And the roll is called up yonder.
And when I hear In the Garden, and that verse, and he walks with me, and he talks to me, and he tells me I am his own. I mean, that, when I hear that, my faith kind of bubbles up more. Because, you know, I know that he's with me, and he talks with me, and he listens to my prayers, and he tells me I'm his own. I'm his.
That's better than nobody knows.
We had one really
That's a good one, too.
excellent male
Yes.
singer, I suppose he was a baritone maybe, and he sort of drew the job of singing at each and every funeral in the county.
Mm-hmm.
And there were just about 4 songs that he didn't say, I can only sing 4 songs. He could sing anything, but they always wanted In the Garden, Amazing Grace. I can't remember the other couple, but there were, it was just always what was sung.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Our Father, that wasn't the Lord's Prayer that they sang.
Yeah, I just love In the Garden. In fact, the next to the last Presbyterian church, I served as an interim pastor. They had a vocal group come in, and the lead singer said, now we understand there's someone here who really likes In the Garden. And he said, Pastor Larry, come on up.
Oh.
So I went up and he said, you start us off. And I said, well, no, why don't I just join in when you get started? He said, no, you started off. So I started singing the first verse, and nobody came in until we hit the chorus.
Really?
And then we all sang together. And afterwards I said, you lied to me. He said, well, they lied to me. They said they didn't know how well you could sing, and you were doing a pretty good job. And I honestly think that was a God moment, because I don't have a good voice.
Somebody let you get in on the key you could handle.
Yeah. I had 2 people ask me if I'd sing at weddings.
Oh, my gosh.
And I said, In the Garden?
I want to just say one thing. In about 7 or 8 minutes, that statewide tornado siren's going to start blasting.
Okay.
I mean, we can be talking when it happens. I just don't
What are we supposed to do?
just sit
Practice
there.
your
Practice your emergency
Yes.
preparedness thing if it's a tornado. What do you do if it's a tornado?
Get under the table.
Go outside and watch.
Yeah. We're from Kansas. We go outside.
The last time I heard that was when the fire was north of town coming this way.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody goes, everybody.
That was the
What you
scariest.
talk about.
My
My
sister
mom,
lived out there.
when I grew up in the church,
Well, the big
played
one,
the
the
piano.
biggest one.
Well, this one
involved my
minister,
daughter's neck.
he wanted a lot of the songs, and some of
It's
those
sad.
songs, and now it's kind of hard,
They wouldn't have been able to
I
do
have to
that.
think, because like, you know, when it hits the high one, and he wanted you to really
Yeah.
hit the music, and she did it was quiet.
Let me point out in here in verse 32, you know, we've sometimes forget the humor that's in Scripture. It says the assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people don't even know why they were there.
Isn't that
I mean, you know, when you hear that read in church, I don't think we hear the humor, but apparently Luke's got a pretty decent sense of humor. And rather than saying these people were just dumb, he said, well, some were yelling one thing, some were yelling another, and most of them didn't even know why they were there.
Larry?
Yes.
You handed out this little study sheet for us.
Yes.
Now, we want to know what that word is at the last part.
That long, the mile-long German word, Heilig.
History, the Heigesmiths.
What does it mean?
We're at the last part.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one.
It's a time or two. Well, page 1 at the bottom paragraph, about 7 or 8, 9 words.
Oh, yeah.
Hell's
Heigescheki.
Heigesheck.
It says, right next to it, Israel was bygone history, something of the past. So it's the core history of Israel, of the people.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
And he goes on, it says, the question of the fate of Israel was not a burning one for Luke, the historian. You know, at that point, he wasn't concerned about what was going to happen
We moved
To,
to
uh,
Hutchinson. Was the pastor here,
to the Jews.
and he was just
All right, should we even attempt to begin? Did we finish that chapter? We did.
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
we wanna know about
I want
Artemis.
you
Hmm?
We wanna know about
to have a
Artemis.
chat.
Isn't there more about Artemis?
No, there's not a whole.
That was the end of it pretty
Never
much.
mind.
Well,
They
good
dismissed
try.
the crowd.
Yeah.
We're
I
Never
really
mind.
like that city clerk.
Besides, my teeth
It
aren't
was
moving
just-
real good.
Calm down.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
that guttural stuff.
You run the risk of being charged with rioting for what happens day, since there is no justification that we can give as a reason for this disorderly gathering.
Yeah. You know, now remember, Paul had been there 3 years. Why, 3 years into his stay, why are they now starting to have this little riot?
Because he was cutting into their business.
That's right. You know, in 3 years' time, their sales started dropping. And so you got this one guy who gets them all stirred up and says, hey, what the hell? Demetrius. And Demetrius is a Greek name.
What does it mean, actually, Demetrius? All
Demetrius.
that means.
I'm not sure what the Greek on that is. Now I tell you what I do at home in my iPad. I have Google Translate. So when I run across a word, and both the commentary and this article uses a lot of Greek, and in this article there were a couple in Latin that I can type in, and it translates it for me.
That's cool.
So, because you run into a word like that and you think, hold on, what? It's like this whole article ends. It says, we realize that we have again to raise the old question, quid sibi viator Israel? And I had to type that in, and it's, what happens to Israel?
Yeah.
Okay, so you made this for us, and this takes time and paper, and you were kind enough to do it. What's the intrigue in this for you? You want us to see this and kind of grip a little bit.
About Luke.
What's the questions or the intrigue about?
What?
So I'll know how to read this thing.
This is, how does Luke deal with the history that's going on? Is he approaching it from a historical perspective or an autobiographical perspective? And so he points out here, I think in the,
What do you think? I'll still read it.
I think he is a poor historian. I think he's telling us history, but like any historian, he's telling us from his point of view.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, I mean, he said the Jewishness in Luke Acts, Christology shows us the most Jewish Messiah within the New Testament, Luke is not talking about the church as church, but about the people of God. The promise of salvation are given to Israel and never taken away from the people. The law, the Torah, has full validity for Christians of Jewish origin and for others, Gentiles, in the form of apostolic decree. Only a Jew could understand all the Jewish words, conceptions, and customs in Luke. In only a few cases does Luke give us an explanation. Paul is presented to us in an unfamiliar way, not as an apostle to the Gentiles, but to the Jews. That's an interesting twist on this, because he's
So there's two parts of the Jewish church, the believers in Christ and the non-believers.
yes,
As a culture.
that's right. And we still believe that we're part of that Jewish heritage. And
Is that right or wrong?
I think it's right. I mean, we have, and this whole war in Israel now, and people saying, you know, we need to defeat the Jews. Let's all go outside, I think. You know, it's like the Jews shouldn't be allowed to exist. This is biblical. I mean, the Babylonians conquered them. The Egyptians conquered. I mean, it's just one after another. And then to have a whole race try to be eradicated by the Nazis, you know, and now we have people saying, you know, give Israel back to the Palestinians. Well, the Palestinians never owned Israel. You know, I mean, it was.
How does that work? How does that work?
Well, they're fraudulent being there.
Well,
and
who
calling-
owned it? Who owned it before the United Nations or?
God
whoever?
gave the title deed on it, so you go
But
back
the-
to here.
See.
So, the UN or whoever just.
And
figured it
Israel's
out.
only about 20% of what,
Oh, it's just a little
I mean,
patch.
it's 20% of what God said is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You'd have to go into Jordan, Saudi Arabia, some.
yeah. So, you know,
Palestine.
but we're,
They ought to give them a little chunk of Southern California or something.
yeah. Well, they're almost all over here.
That's very thought. Let them come over the border like everybody else and get $10,000.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the Palestinians are getting a
All
bad
right.
rap right now.
We'll start off with chapter 20. Bye-bye. Chapter 20 next Wednesday.
Yeah.